Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the new year, first episode of 2022. My name is Roel Dionisio. I am your co-host alongside with Francois Verges. How are you doing, Francois?
I'm very good. Happy New Year, Roel. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I got a lot of rest over the end of December, and then still getting some rest. So doing a little bit of work here and there, but I'm ready to get started for this new year. How about you?
Yeah, I'm feeling good as well. I got some good rest, good needed rest, I guess. So yeah, I'm excited about 2022 as well. We can see that, I think we'll have some conferences again this year, and maybe things will start to go back to normal. I hope. We say that every year, but hopefully this year is the year.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward for a little bit more social interactions, to be honest.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to get back to that normal. And I know a lot of people are going to get started with a bunch of brand new goals, a bunch of, new achievements they're trying to make. So we're starting off the first few episodes with like beginner series of how to get started with different things in Wi-Fi. And with this episode, we're going to talk about getting started with Wi-Fi in 2022. So trying to talk about specifically things that we think are trends or things that'll be useful for this year to help you move forward and get started with Wi-Fi. What do you think, Francois?
Yeah, it's a good. I think it's a good industry to get into. It's definitely a technology that's trendy and here to stay. But also, it's also very good technology to work with. It's very, challenging sometimes, rewarding when you make it work. Sometimes it feels like magic. There's a little bit of everything in Wi-Fi. So if you work in IT or in networking and you don't fully like what you do and you want to try something new, I think Wi-Fi has a lot to offer.
Yeah, and everyone's using Wi-Fi. So this is why it is a good reason to look into the technology and understand how it works, especially with people working from home, because they're all going to be working over their Wi-Fi network. It is critical to understand why it's not working and what we can do as professionals to help people with a better connection. So before we actually dive into getting started, I want to have everyone go to cleartosend.net/survey to take our listener survey. That's going to help us understand who you are as a listener and what kind of topics you want to hear from us this year. It's going to kind of shape our episodes as well. One of the reasons why I thought we should do these beginner series is there was a comment in there saying we need more generic and introductory type of episodes because we have done a lot of high, pretty technical topics. So I think we need to bring it back a little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's useful for us to kind of know what you guys are expecting, so we can tailor the content a little bit against what you want. Obviously, we tailor the content based on what we like to do as well. But if it's beneficial for everyone, it's even better.
Yeah, so it's always good for even the both of us to step back down and talk about the basics, because it reminds us of like where we got started and talking about the fundamentally how Wi-Fi works. So why don't we talk about why it's important first to even get into Wi-Fi, right? We mentioned that everyone uses Wi-Fi, but one of the biggest things that I see with people whenever I talk to clients is that they just don't understand how it works, right? They may be very good at like route and switch, security, but when it comes to Wi-Fi, I've heard comments like, well, it's just not my expertise or my wheelhouse, so I need to just have somebody else do it for me. And I think in today's world in IT, like Wi-Fi is that important that you need to pick it up, right? You need to at least know the fundamentals.
Yeah, and to kind of outline what you say, usually when I teach, I say that we haven't used have-duplex more than ever. because, people don't really realize that Wi-Fi is half duplex. And so to kind of, paint the picture and really try to make them understand how Wi-Fi works, I usually say that we use half duplex more than ever in 2022 this year, I guess.
Yeah, and you thought we thought you got rid of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. But to go back to what you were saying, it's one of the things why it's one of the reasons why it's important to understand the technology, but also Wi-Fi is a very resilient technology. So even if you don't fully master it, you can still make it work. But then when it fails, that's when it becomes harder to understand why it's failing. So if you want to be better at kind of troubleshooting, or getting some of the knowledge and tools you need to troubleshoot Wi-Fi, it's important to get into it.
Yeah, that troubleshooting piece is going to be the most important part, because that's when everything is on the line, right? That's when executives start getting on people's back because Wi-Fi isn't working. So understanding how it works will make you a better troubleshooter. I mean, just like with any other IT technology. And we put so much emphasis on the backbone network, right? The switching, the routing, the security. But what everyone's using to get onto that network that you're building is Wi-Fi. So it needs to be as equally important and rock solid, right? So when it comes to then people who go, all right, well, it's important. What should I do now? How do I even get started, right? So what's one thing you tell people, Francois, what to do first to get started?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it depends on what you're doing today, but I always say that a Wi-Fi engineer is a network engineer. So I always say that, Wi-Fi is a subset of networking. So if you want to be a good Wi-Fi engineer, you have to be a good network engineer, I think. So you kind of have to start with the basics of understanding networking. And then once you have that covered, then you can start looking at the basics of Wi-Fi. And the book I always go back to is the CWNA book. It's a big book. It's like 1,000 pages. But what I usually say is you don't have to read it, from cover to cover. You can pick and choose your chapters. You can, go as, have your own rhythm. But it has a lot of good fundamental information that will definitely help you to grasp the technology, get familiar with the acronyms, because, let's face it, Wi-Fi is just another networking technology. It comes with its bunch of acronyms. And then it will kind of help you to get started from the theory side of things. So you can understand, what you're doing when you start, playing with equipment, playing with settings and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great reference book as well. Like you said, you don't have to read it front to back, but you can keep it on your bookshelf. And when you need to look into something, that CWNA book is a good reference. You can use the index and search for something, especially when you're just trying to get into it, right? At home, you probably have Wi-Fi at home. I'm assuming everyone's got Wi-Fi at home. You could start there and start looking into the settings that you can configure on your router, start to learn and understand what those settings do, and be able to see the effects with the devices, right? And then with that CWNA book, you can kind of apply that theory to your home Wi-Fi, because the enterprise, while it's more expensive and has a lot of knobs, they still fundamentally work the same. The Wi-Fi works the same. It's just a matter of different settings that you're applying. But most of those settings are the same, like channel width, data rates, those kind of things, right? It start at home first, and then maybe buy some inexpensive lab equipment, like some off eBay, like some Cisco APs or even SMB APs. There's plenty to get, like Unify APs. Those are affordable. You could start there and start building your own lab to test out things.
And you don't have to buy necessarily. I mean, if you can have a training, for Wi-Fi, they have some really good introductory good all around training that you can get in order to get a good understanding of the technology. The Ekahau design class is really good for that. You could do CWNA training if you want to as well. But you can also start, yourself if you don't have that budget. I know when I started back in the days, I didn't have any money to spend on training. My employer was not interested in me, in paying for those trainings because I wasn't doing, Wi-Fi at work. So I just went through the CWNA book. I actually read it twice to fully understand it. And that's how I started. And then, we're only talking about how to get started. So that's what I did when I started. After that, what I started to do is watch videos. I'm more a video kind of guy. So I started to go on YouTube and watch some conferences videos or mobility field day. And at first I didn't understand anything. And then slowly but surely you start to pick up some stuff from that as well.
Because you're going to see the latest technologies today, right? You're going to see 802.11ax, you're going to see AC, and then in the books they'll
Wi-Fi
cover
7.
Maybe Wi-Fi 7. I don't know. That's
we're starting to see that.
That's a different story. I would say, understand what Wi-Fi 7 means, like is the newer technologies, but understand what's being used today, right? And understand that devices all have different capabilities. So you can start looking at those technologies, reference your textbooks like CWNA to understand how it all works. And then in the enterprise, let's say you are a network engineer and maybe there's somebody else that's also handling the Wi-Fi. Start working with that person and maybe start looking at the configuration to understand what those are. Use a Wi-Fi scanner like Wi-Fi Explorer to see to get some visualization of Wi-Fi over the air and get yourself more familiar. Like I think the more you immerse yourself with Wi-Fi, like you were saying, Francois, like watching YouTube videos, watching or listening to other podcasts, reading the books, it may sound very difficult at first, but as you keep learning and learning, you'll get the lingo, right? And it's the same with any other technology. If I was to dive into routing and start, like BGP is not my strong suit. But if I start getting more into it day to day and labbing, then I'll get familiar with it, right? It just looks very scary up front and in the beginning, but you'll get used to it.
And I think also you have different ways of learning. Some people like to dive into the practical and kind of learn as they go. Some other people prefer to spend a little bit more time on the theory at first. And then when they feel comfortable, then they start doing the practical stuff. So depending on, how you are and how you learn, you can approach it differently. I know I'm more a theory type of guy on my end because of the way I was used to learn stuff in France. But I also see a lot of people liking the practical side of things more than
I'm the same way. I do the theory and then I dive into hands-on. And I think as you start doing practical, then you'll see that with today's technologies, Wi-Fi architectures, you'll find that you might need to learn some Python as well, right? Because Francois, you've been doing a lot more Python with wireless networking. And I think we're going to see more of that, especially if you want to be very efficient and maybe build some custom solutions around Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and maybe we can do another episode on Python and see how we can get started with Python as well. But for both Python and Wi-Fi, also what you could do in order to make it a little easier is try to see how you can apply what you're learning to your work. So like you were saying earlier, if you have a colleague that's working with you, try to see how you can get involved with them on the Wi-Fi projects. Even if it's not your duty, but if you're interested in it, maybe you can do it or volunteer, do it after work, whatnot, and see how you can, find some sort of purpose to your studies. So it can, keep you accountable and also keep you engaged and focused in it.
Yeah, exactly. And earlier, Francois, you mentioned training. There's very few places where you can get solid Wi-Fi training, right? The one place I tell people to go to right now is wifitraining.com. There's a lot of great instructors there, and they tackle a lot of different subjects. And I think you and I, Francois, have trained for Wi-Fi training. Lots of good people there. And then even with our course site, we're going to start adding a little bit more training. So courses.cleartosend.net, we'll start adding more there in the future as well. I guess that dives into with training, what kind of certs should people go after? Is certs something that's worth it for Wi-Fi and network professionals?
Yes, and I see certs as a way to learn in a structured environment, if you see what I mean. And it has the additional benefits of, being there on your resume if you need it, if you needed to get a raise or a new job or whatnot. So it's a good deal as well to look at the certs, because people that create the certs, they've went through the material, they've organized it in a way that it's easy for us to learn. So why not take advantage of that and learn stuff and get certified on the way.
Start with the Cwnp certifications, especially with the CWNA to get the foundations. Even just going through that book for CWNA will give you a wealth of knowledge. And then from there, you can start diving into vendor specific certifications from Cisco, Aruba, Juniper. And as you get more into design, there's even the Ekahau classes that you, Francois, teach as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all these options are valid depending on, what's relevant for you, for your work, what you like as well, which vendor you like the most. I like to start with CWNP as well, because they focus on the, on the standards. So that then it could be applied to any vendors. And when you do the CWNP first, and then you go through the vendor certifications, you kind of understand which technology is vendor specific, which technology is not. And I think it helps a little bit anyway. It helped for me in my case, because vendors, they will tend to not tell you sometimes which feature is theirs and which feature is not. So it's good to have this foundation so you can kind of understand that in a better way. And kind of reinforce some of the stuff you learn with CWNP. So that's those certs are great. Don't try to do all of them at once though. Just do one at a time. I think it's enough.
It's a lot of work too.
To your work. Yeah.
It's a lot of work to try to do all those certifications at once. And there's some people, even in our group on the Slack channel, who just go after certifications so easily. I'm jealous of them. They just knock them out so quickly. But it's up to where you want to be with your career goals, especially who you work for. Where I work, certs don't even matter. So I go after them just for my own pure goals, right? Self goals. But as you go into these certs, then that's when you start diving into lab equipment. So you might be wondering, well, what kind of lab equipment should I use? And can I do this virtually? So unfortunately, you can't really lab Wi-Fi virtually because you need to see how Wi-Fi works, especially with the devices you have on hand. You can't really see that if you're playing with somebody's lab remotely. And as you work for a company, it becomes easier to sometimes get that equipment because maybe there's spare equipment on site or the company funds that equipment for you. A lot of us, we actually use our own funds to get equipment either from eBay or equipment swaps, or we just buy them out. Like you and I, Francois, have done that before where we just buy the equipment and start testing with it.
Yeah. And like you said, at home, you should already have plenty of Wi-Fi to study. You could study your own Wi-Fi. You could study your neighbor's Wi-Fi.
Coffee Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have a Sonos speaker and a Wi-Fi router in your house, you have enough to do a lot of studying.
Yeah, all you need are some devices, and then you can even test things like seeing how much capacity you get out of your Wi-Fi network once you start adding more devices. Right, like do it with one, add another one. Put up another AP on the same channel, see what happens. There's a lot you can do. And that's where you really start to learn is when you start either changing the configuration, messing it up, fixing it. That's where you really start to learn. So even when it comes to the vendor side, like just pick one and start testing.
And you may need some equipment, some tools to do packet captures, and get even deeper into the studying. And we did plenty of episodes on that. If you search on the Clear to Send website, if you search for
we can add links to
Wi-Fi
that.
packet captures, you can see and see what you need. It's not much actually. You can actually do it with Linux. You can do it pretty much with just a Wi-Fi adapter that has the proper drivers. And once you start doing packet captures, you can really get into it. If you're doing CWNA and looking at the standards, you can really reference what you're learning, looking at the frames. If you cannot do packet captures, you can find a lot of PCAPs online of people that people shares. We've done it on the website previously. So you can really start studying and look at things even if you don't have a lot of equipment at home.
Yeah. So when it comes to then the books, we mentioned CWNA as a book to read, but there's other books out there as well. There's even the 802.11 standard. It's not quite a book unless you print it out. It's a lot to read and it's dry, but that's kind of where everything comes from, right? So it's worth looking at that over at the IEEE website. One book that I like that's also pretty technical is the Next Generation Wireless LANs book, which covers 802.11n and AC. But that book is really good and dives in deep. What is one of your favorite books, Francois?
Apart from CWNA, I like the Next Generation Wireless LAN books. I usually say that these are the English readable version of the standards.
Yeah.
Because they're actually written in a language we can understand. Which other books have I used? I've used the CWSB and CWDP books quite a bit as well.
There's also the ones from Matthew Gast, which talks about 802. I think it's called 802.11 wireless networks, and then he has some separate books on N and AC.
Yeah, isn't it the one, the Next Generation Wireless one? I saw that that was the one from Matthew Gast. Maybe not.
Maybe
that's another one.
Let me see. Yeah, I don't think it was. No, it wasn't. It was from
okay.
A couple of other folks. But yeah, those are great books to even start with. I mean, you can't go wrong with picking one of them and start reading them because it will take you a while to get through.
Yeah.
And it'll be one of those books that you will have to reread anyways. You can never get it on the first pass.
The one I was talking about was, I think, where the books from Matthew Gast, and I still remember reading the one on AC. And you have to read them with a notebook next to you. Because you're gonna have to take notes. Yeah.
Even with the equipment, you're gonna want to test it with the equipment and understand it. Pretty dry material, but easier to read than the actual standard.
And even if you don't fully understand it, you can still take a lot out of them, I found.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's blogs that you could read. So Francois, you've got a lot of great content on your blog at senfionetworks.com. I think there's a lot of good stuff that you've responded to your own questions, right? That's how you've written that content. You come across a problem, then you write about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how we should do it, I think, because, so I always go back to it sometimes when I have questions, and I know it's on my blog, so it's easy to find. I now have a Wi-Fi engineer working with me. And sometimes he asks me a question, and I just send him links to my blog. And he's like, the other day he was like, "It seems like you have the answer to everything on your blog." So, and I was telling him that's just because one day I asked the question to myself, and I just decided to write something about it.
And does he ever do a Google search and come across your blog?
I don't know. I haven't asked him, but I do that, and I end up on the Clear to Send website more than.
Yeah, you can find stuff on our podcast website about getting started. We've talked about different topics before, and we try to refresh it every so often because things change. Some other blogs to look at is German's blog, who dives deep into Wi-Fi 6. So we'll add a link to that in the show note over at cleartosend.net/279, and then even Rasika's blog, mrncciEw.com, has a ton of great content. I think for those of you who dive into the Cwnp certifications and also Cisco wireless certifications, you'll probably come across this site all the time. He shows up all the time. Yeah. He shows up all the time on Google. He's there. As far as like career paths, 'cause I know a lot of you guys who are getting started probably want to know, is there a career path? What's the trajectory if I was to get into Wi-Fi, right? And it's a very niche field going into Wi-Fi because for one, there's not a lot of Wi-Fi experts. And so a lot of people who go into Wi-Fi sometimes have a background in network engineering because Wi-Fi just falls under networking, right? You're doing your switching and routing, and then someone goes, "Hey, Wi-Fi is not working. Can you take a look at this?" So really the career path that I see for people getting into Wi-Fi is they've already got strong network engineering skills, and now they've specialized into Wi-Fi. And so I think from there, you can even dive into further specializations. There's some people who are just architects or designers, some who just do configuration. And I think what we'll end up seeing is some sort of automation with Wi-Fi in the future.
Wi-Fi DevOps.
Yeah, possibly like
Wi-Fi DevOps engineer.
Yeah. Roll that in with the net DevOps. And now you got a specialized person with the Wi-Fi DevOps.
Yeah. And I think, when you work as a Wi-Fi engineer, you also, depending on which company you work in, you could be doing different things. So you could work as a consultant or for like a VAR, for instance. So working on multiple Wi-Fi projects for different customers and all of that. Or you could be the Wi-Fi, guy, the Wi-Fi engineer for the end customer. So, taking care of a large Wi-Fi network, university or retail company or something like this. Or, you could also be working for the vendors, right? And working as a sales engineer or, or
the actual salesperson. There's not a lot of salespeople who also understand Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you could be the sales, you could be technical marketing. That's how they call it.
Yeah,
technical marketing engineers. You could be consultant, working for the vendors. Some vendors have their teams of network Wi-Fi engineers that can also help out on projects. So yeah, you could work for different, I guess, category of companies, and you can also work in different industries. Depending on what you want to do. So it's
because there's the device manufacturer and testing. Like Apple has a lot of those engineers where you have to really understand Wi-Fi because a lot of their products work over Wi-Fi, like the Apple TV, their iPhone. So you need a strong Wi-Fi person to interact with their products. Some of the other skills. So all the stuff that we talked about, right, will help develop other skills that are needed as you get started in Wi-Fi. The ones that come to mind is communication, soft skills, and project management. And the way I tie that in as you get started is as you are building a lab, you are somewhat of a project manager. You have to plan out how you do your testing and how you do the configuration of your devices. And that'll lead into like a project management side of things, because you and I, Francois, we do a lot of our own project management with clients. So that's a pretty important skill. And then tying that into soft skills as well. We have to be able to talk to people and help them understand Wi-Fi because they're not technical. They don't understand, when you say AX, 11AX, they won't know what that is. And so you need to be able to kind of bring it down to their level, use some good analogies, which will help build your communication skills, especially if you're going to write about these topics. What other skills, Francois, do you think, or whatever, do you want to add to those, what I just said?
No, I think the one you have are really good. I would say that they're really good for any engineers in general. For Wi-Fi, I would focus on two things. The first one would be the continuous learning. So having the curiosity, I should say. When you're a Wi-Fi engineer, it's changing all the time. And if you compare how Wi-Fi has evolved compared to Ethernet in the last 25 years, it's night and day. So Wi-Fi is like a continuous changing technology. So it's very important for for us to be for the, always curious, interested in what's new and interested in learning what's new if you want to stay up to date. So that's one thing. The second thing is, when the sales part of it, I call it the sales part of it, but it's more the education part of it. Like you said, Wi-Fi is not a known technology. So every time we talk to customers, every time we try to explain what we do, we're going to have to do a lot of education and explaining. Sometimes we have to do whiteboarding. So being able to explain what you're doing in simple words is very useful. Because even if you're not, doing training per se, you're going to have to sell your solution at one point, and you're going to have to explain, why you decided to go that route or the other route. And you're going to need to have those skills to be able to help you along the way. Especially
when someone says, why should we go to Wi-Fi 6 if Wi-Fi 5 is working?
Like, what did you install an AP over there?
Yeah, why did you configure that AP with a 80 megahertz wide channel? Like, you got to be able to explain some of these things. And here's an example, because I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were showing me a report that a third party did, and in the report, and they just kind of used the canned Ekahau report, but they modified something with a recommendation that said you should go from 20 megahertz channel widths to 40 or even 80, but with no explanation as to, I think it just to increase like speed and bandwidth, but that was all they mentioned.
Increase the support calls.
So there's things like that you need to be able to explain and maybe encounter it and say, here's why you shouldn't do that. Or here's the downside of doing that. Right. Mm-hmm. So to be able to explain things to people and help them understand why, that's going to be key. The writing piece, I think even blogging about some of these topics is a very beneficial thing to do. Even if no one's going to read your blog post, mm-hmm. I think it's good for you to try to put it on, put it to paper, kind of in a sense, right? Write it out and see if you could explain it. And I think that'll help even solidify your knowledge of the topic and help you get even better for next year, or even for near the end of this year as you get started with Wi-Fi. So that's pretty much the end of our episode. We will add links to blog posts and links to tools that we could recommend you use, whether it's Windows or Mac. I don't think we have a Linux episode, but Windows or Mac, we'll link to that, and some other useful resources as well. As a reminder, head over to our listener survey page, cleartosend.net/survey. Just takes about 3 to 5 minutes. If you could fill that out and let us know how you'd like to see the direction of the podcast in regards to topics, that would be useful. And any other feedback you want to give, there's a text box if you want to give us any feedback as well. But other than that,
I was going to say, and if you're interested in getting into Wi-Fi, just let us know what your plan is, and feel free to update us as you go during the year. On Twitter or wherever you're following us. And if you want to engage with other people on our Slack, we do have, channels that people use when they start studying Wi-Fi. I know we have one on CWNS studies and stuff. So if you want to engage with other people that are in similar situation as you can also get or register on our Slack group and start talking to people.
Cool. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us on this episode. If you guys are brand new to the podcast, welcome. Glad to have you here, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.